Welcome to X Global News. Right now Ukraine is receiving defense materials from the United States through 5 free aid programs and 2 cash programs. Let's start with the free aid channels. First, the Presidential Drawdown Authority, PDA, the Presidential Defense Material Transfer Authority. Second, Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, USAI, Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. Third, Foreign Military Financing, FMF, Foreign Military Financing. Fourth, Excess Defense Articles, EDA, Excess Defense Materials. Fifth, Third-Party Transfers, TPT, Defense Material Transfers from a third party. There are also 2 programs for acquiring defense materials for money. These are Foreign Military Sales, FMS, Foreign Military Sales and Direct Commercial Sales, DCS. Notably, nothing has been delivered in 230 days under the vaunted Ukraine Democracy Defense Lend-Lease Act of 2022, signed by Joe Biden on May 9, 2022. The Biden administration ignores this delivery tool, preferring other government programs with longer approval procedures. Apparently, this is due to the fact that the Lend-Lease Act to Ukraine places all responsibility for the volume and speed of arms deliveries to Ukraine on the U.S. President, which Biden does not want to take on himself. Therefore, the Lend-Lease is not working. The situation is more complicated for the EU countries, because under the NATO umbrella they have largely saved on military expenditures over the past 3 decades. Nevertheless, even there one cannot speak of the depletion of arsenals. Rather, we can talk about the fears of the EU countries to be drawn into a direct confrontation with Russia. There is another important consideration. The Russian-Ukrainian war has shown that all calculations that wars between major regional powers and blocs have finally become obsolete have not been justified. Therefore, it is simply not possible to continue to maintain its defense capabilities by upgrading equipment from the 1970s to 1980s. Many non-bloc states and regional leaders have created their own military-industrial complex, which provides them with quite competitive military technology, technologically advanced, effective and not as insanely expensive as the U.S. and Russian developments. We are talking about Israel, Turkey, Iran, South Korea and other countries. The Ukrainian fields have now turned into the firing range, which will shape the image of modern army of the XXI century. And there is no special sense to save the samples of already obsolete equipment in the arsenals of NATO countries. In addition, supplies of weapons and equipment to the AFU will lead to even heavier losses of Russian military equipment, which will significantly weaken the potential of the Russian army and, ultimately, bring the end of the war closer. Another popular argument of Western politicians in under-delivering weapons to Ukraine is the desire not to provoke World War III. At the same time, U.S. and European politicians are careful not to see that Russian propagandists and Russian leaders openly say that they are at war with NATO and the United States, not with Ukraine. And these statements are believed by the loyal core of Russian society, especially the military. The inaction of NATO creates an illusion of impunity for the Russian leadership. In the view of Putin, Patrushev and others, Western countries are weak because of their lack of ideology and democracy. Democracy is generally perceived by the Russian leadership as synonymous with venality and cowardice. It was precisely in anticipation of NATO inaction that Russia launched a special military operation on February 24. Prior to that, Putin had repeatedly tested the U.S. and Europe weakly by launching the operation in Georgia, annexing Crimea, and unleashing a difficult situation in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, where without Russian presence there would be no people's republics. The U.S. and Europe were then limited to sanctions. It turns out that after February 24, if anything, it did not go further than sanctions. This only strengthens Putin in his own rightness, in the fact that he can continue with impunity. Therefore, restrictions in military supplies only increase losses among Ukrainians and Russians, as they create an illusion among the military and political leadership of the Russian Federation that it is possible to turn the tide of hostilities by switching to a strategy of attrition. The specter of the Munich collusion still hovers over the leaders of Western democracies as it did 84 years ago. In order for Ukraine to win the war with Russia, it is necessary to increase the supply of military hardware and equipment. From a purely military point of view, Ukraine has a combat-ready army, capable of solving tasks of any complexity, but not enough resources for the army to have something to fight with. According to estimates of Ukrainian experts, in December 2022 the correlation of the sides in manpower was at least equalized. The RF armed forces even outstripped the AFU by 14% after partial mobilization in Russia. Although in the summer the number of the AFU at the front was twice as high as the pro-Russian formations. According to various data, we can say that the strength of the Russian armed forces in December 2022 increased by 70% compared with February. It is clear that the numerical superiority was achieved at the expense of loss of quality, but the new numerous units need something to stop them. Despite all losses, Russia is twice as much as Ukraine in tanks, 2,000 versus 1,000, and the Russian armed forces retain a threefold superiority in artillery systems. Despite serious deliveries of various types of armored vehicles to Ukraine, the Russian armed forces still have more than five-fold superiority in this type of weaponry. To level the numerical superiority of the Russian armed forces, Ukraine needs armaments and armored vehicles. The AFU has done an excellent job of training personnel, training them to use modern means of destruction, to act in defense and, after Izium and Kupiansk, we can say that in the offensive as well. But all these skills and the high level of training of soldiers and officers are nothing without weapons, tanks, artillery, aircraft and air defense equipment. The request of Ukraine's military leadership, voiced by General Valery Zaluzhny, is still quite modest. According to our calculations, Ukraine needs 1,000 tanks, 2,000 artillery systems, 3,000 light armored vehicles, as well as up to 100 fighter planes and massive supplies of air defense and missile defense systems. The West has such resources, as well as opportunities for quick deliveries, but it lacks the political will to do so. The infamous Lend-Lease must finally work. To reduce Ukraine's dependence on Western supplies, it is necessary to develop its own production of weapons, shells and munitions. This can be done and is already being done at the production facilities of Eastern and Central European countries, but the production volumes are still small. To turn the tide of war and achieve victory, reducing military and civilian casualties, Ukraine needs aid from the EU, NATO, the US and other countries to the tune of $168 billion in 2023. Yes, from a military and tactical point of view, Ukraine is operating in the best possible way and is performing very well on the battlefield with the weapons it already has. But any weapon requires maintenance, equipment, ammunition, and so on. What they have at the moment can be destroyed in a month by Russian troops or be out of order because of weather conditions or a mine hit. Also, a successful offensive requires a huge amount of ammunition, humanitarian supplies, and especially tanks. An offensive without tanks and artillery support is impossible. And as we know, artillery fires a huge amount of shells every day that Ukraine cannot produce in its factories, which makes it difficult for them to do large-scale tactical actions. Because of ammunition limitations, they behave carefully and calculate every move well. The Ukrainian armed forces do not have such huge stockpiles as the Russian Federation, which is still wasting Soviet Union supplies. And as we know, the Soviet Union at one time made huge or even very gigantic reserves of military resources in case of war with the United States of America. That's the end of our video. Do like it. Write your opinion in the comments. Subscribe to the channel to continue to follow our new videos. Thank you for your attention. See you soon.